All right. You are an analyst for FTN Bets and BetUS. Give us the background. How do you end up in that position? How do you end up there?
Well,
And
do we want to go
what else?
all the way to the
Let,
beginning?
let me take an even further step back. Is that what you're primarily doing right now, or are you primarily doing something else?
And that is probably one of the three prongs of things that I do. There is the content side. Again, analyst for both of those companies. Really, what I'm doing is I'm doing shows, I'm doing writing, I'm active in a Discord, kind of sharing my thoughts, sharing my bets, sharing my ideas. The other kind of third of my time goes to actual betting, building models, originating, putting in my own stuff. I have a couple people I do some top-down stuff with, being a part of that. And the third thing, not quite out of left field, but I do some contract work for independent pharmacy buying group. Basically, any pharmacy that's not CVS, Rite Aid, or Walgreens is some poor schmuck that went to school to become a chemist, then a healthcare worker, and got stuck around at a 7-Eleven. But all I'll say, people, is they're the last true community entrepreneurs. Take all your generic prescriptions to your local community independent pharmacy. Take your brands to CVS. Let those jerks lose money.
We have Prec Shot not too far from us. Maybe just move over to them. I gotta admit, I'm at my local Hy-Vee. I'm sorry, Noops.
It happens. Convenience gets us all. I still stop at CVS from time to time to buy toilet paper.
So that's a heavy involvement in the world of sports gambling as your overall portfolio as a career individual. How did you land there? You go back as far as you want here, bud.
Yeah, it's one of those things where coming out of college, I basically pushed really hard, went to a very good private high school, went to LaSalle University, but I was kind of burnt out after 7 years of going to private school and maybe didn't try as hard as I should have at going to college, but left with good grades, had a great 4 years, grew a lot as a person, and walked into a really nice job at a wholesale pharmaceutical distributor and worked there for 10 years. But the last 4 years, what I found myself doing was spending, honestly, most of my time building betting models while I was sitting at my desk. I mean, it's an Excel file. Nobody has any idea what any of it means. I mean, names like Serge Ibaka, that sounds like a pharmaceutical product. You could just sort of get past that stuff. And especially being big into tennis at the time, a lot of names that, again, even if people could read them, they wouldn't really know what it was. And it's one of those things where growing up, I've always been kind of a big numbers person, a big risk person. I love playing cards, grew up playing poker. I love watching horses. That was one of the big things I did with my dad growing up. Obviously, fantasy football is really huge. So, got into all that stuff and basically found myself spending more and more time trying to figure out how to crack that nut and realize basically, if I don't become good at this, I'm just going to be poor because this is only going to get worse and all this stuff. So I start building some tennis models and stuff. And one of my favorite things to tell people that are getting into this is reach out. This is a really great community. Everyone is really willing to talk and help you. And I'm sure you guys know Drew Dinsick, also known as Whale Capper, one half of the Deep Dive Pod. Big listener to them. Basically, I'm listening to a lot of that stuff at the time. They had done a tennis podcast. So I just sent Drew some ideas. And it turns out I stumbled into one of the best bets I've ever made in my life. I had no idea how good this was, but at a time, certain books would let you take a tennis spread and parlay it with a total. Now, if you've never bet tennis before, it's almost, you can basically bet a game spread, which is how many games a player will win by. So say there's a match that's 6-4, 6-4. That player won by 4 games. The total was 20. If you're a favorite and you have to cover 5.5, 6.5 games, that is highly correlated with a match going under. Basically, it has to happen quickly. The more games there are, the lower the margin could be. So I shouldn't have been allowed to do that. And I had done enough math to basically figure that out. Reached out to Whale Capper. He's like, holy shit, this is really stupid. Why are they letting you do this? And sort of turned that into my first intro into kind of a couple chats. I mean, DM Twitter chats, basically stuff like that. And now I'm amongst this group of people that are much smarter than me, are much better bettors than I am. So what can I do? What can I provide? And what I realize is after a decade of working in corporate America, being the fourth generation of my dad, my grandfather, my great grandfather, all really good salespeople. I come from a family of people, the oldest of four. My dad is the oldest of six. My mom is the oldest of four. We don't get together with less than 20 people, and they all like to talk. So what can I provide to this group? All these sharp people, all this stuff is happening, and they suck at content. I love all these guys, but they can't talk. They don't know how to sort of get that stuff together. So I start doing a lot of content stuff. And what I find is, the first show I did, the Net Worth podcast, was a tennis show originally. And that's kind of the first ball that gets rolling down the hill that leads me into that, because it was just a way for me to provide value to smart people, to increase my network and continue to build sort of a brand, to build some notability, to meet smarter people as I continue to learn, as I continue to grow.
And what are the markets that what are the sports that you're emphasizing right now?
Always been a big NBA bettor. That is my favorite sport. I think basketball is the greatest sport. It's one of the ones that I really watch religiously. I love doing that. I think there's a lot of value that could be had in NBA futures if you time things right. And then tennis. We were talking before we got on here. Tennis is the greatest gambling sport in the world. 20 hours a day, 11 months a year, someone somewhere is playing tennis and we can bet on it. And it is something that you need a little bit of data. You need to understand the markets, I think, a little bit. But if you're just someone that gets up, watches tennis, follows a few players religiously, figures out how they play, it ends up being a lot like handicapping boxing or UFC. Now, I know we get punched in the face. There's a lot less blood, if you will, but it's one-on-one. It's all about styles. It's all about tactics. It's all about the situations. And the best part is, as an NBA handicapper and someone who bets on the Sixers a few times a year like a jerk, knowing Embiid's going to be out 10 minutes before the game starts, if your tennis player gets hurt, even during the match, they just give you your money back.
Oh, really?
Do you have trouble getting down on tennis, like, since it is kind of a niche market, or?
So it's only a niche market in the United States.
Okay.
Tennis, if you go globally, is one of the top three betting markets. I mean, it's soccer, tennis, and then depending on where you look, either basketball or American football still. But depending on where you look, and depending again also on what you bet, right? So there's all the levels of tennis. You have ATP and WTA. If you're going to bet those high-level matches, that's not too hard, especially offshore if you're willing to use some crypto and stuff like that. But even at U.S. books, that's not too bad. But if we're looking to bet first set total alts, if we're looking to bet, player games, goofier things like that, it can be tough. But the higher-level stuff has never really been a problem.
Interesting.
Do you utilize partnerships as part of your process for getting your action down?
Yeah, I'm kind of just on the cusp of that. I'm still at a level where I could mostly get down just by myself. Recently have run into some problems. And as you start to scale up, I've started to work with a few people, and I've yet to break into sort of that next level of, the syndicates, if you will. But there are people out there, folks. If you need to get down and you have a good model, there are people with hundreds, if not thousands of PPHs, most of which from Texas, it seems.
So the individuals that you were talking about and the network that's helped you build yourself out to where you are now, that's not like a part of a syndicate itself. That's just a community of like-minded individuals.
That's just kind of how it works in general. It's one of the things we always sort of make fun of the concept of syndicate. Like it's this. Now, there are organized groups. There are people who have offices. Again, Spanky has an office. Joey Tunes has an office. Other people like that. But it's not like this group of like rough people. I don't know. Syndicate has like this mafia feel to it, like this guys in suits that show up or something like that. But it's there is groups that work together, but it all connects. Spanky knows what Tunes is betting. Tunes know what Spanky's betting. Everybody knows what all the sharps are betting because they have all the accounts. It is this a giant sort of network, and there are hubs place to place. But again, there's something about the word syndicate that just either. It's one of my favorite things about this too in general. Anytime you meet professional people, anytime somebody they tries to make this sound cooler than it is, or like more serious, and it's like, we're not a syndicate. This is ridiculous. No one has ever broken anyone's legs over some PPH you didn't get paid for. You just eat it and go forward. This is not some sort of mafia movie. It's just a bunch of dudes sitting in chairs staring at 6 monitors all day. It's basically corporate America on crack.
We need to start a Good JuJu syndicate, but it's not going to be anything like that.
Nope.
No, it's going to be Good JuJu. It'll be great. I promise.
You've got to find like a big guy who's like a sort of a bodyguard type to stand silently in the back of all that stuff. He doesn't ever says anything, but when it's syndicate time, he walks out and he just, right. I think you can already see, I can see him. He's putting it all together, but that's what I would do is just part of the gag, and it's, like Barstool Advisors, they bring in Feinberg. Obviously you don't have to pay somebody like that, but for the JuJu syndicate time, you got to bring in the guy. You got to bring in your protection.
Oops. Audience. Noops just found the role for Jolly St. Vic on our podcast finally.
The muscle.
He found it. We're just
Jolly
St.
Vic
in the background. He was
a great name for a muscle guy. This is Jolly. He's our muscle.
This is Jolly.
See? Now we've got it figured out. Okay. So what makes NBA so appealing to you from a betting perspective?
I think